Hello and welcome to Buildings of Tomorrow. My name is Jon Lester, and in today's episode, we are talking about user experience or UX and the importance of that whenever we're dealing with some of those different topics, those different solutions out there based in the digital world. And I'm really excited and honored to be joined today by Eva Cochet-Weinandt, who is the head of UX at digital buildings at Siemens Smart Infrastructure. Eva, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
It's a pleasure to have you with us and to talk about something so important because even in my introduction, when I listen or think back to what I said, I feel like I jump too quickly, like many people, when we talk about user experience to digital solutions to things that we see on the screen. And we're excited today to learn from you a little bit more about exactly what UX entails. So let's start there. From you as a professional in this space, what is UX, and importantly, what is it not?
Well, UX is a field that has emerged a decade ago, and there's a lot of misconceptions about UX. UX is almost a buzzword today, but rarely we really understand what it actually means. So UX is very often understood as something that happens in the digital field, but in a broader sense, UX happens in any type of interaction a person would have with your organization. So it can be on a digital product through an application or a cloud platform, but it can also be in a physical space, can also be a physical product. It can be any type of interaction, really, also a service. So in a broader sense, it's any type of interaction a person has with your brand or your organization. So that is probably one of the misconceptions that exist around UX. The second part, and that really comes also from this idea that UX only happens in the digital fields, is there's a misconception between what UX is versus what UI is. So we tend to think that this is just about what is on the screen. That is just what is shown. But actually, the user experience is not just the interface itself. It is really also the workflow that we are providing, how people are going about to achieve a certain task. It can be something that is very complicated, that you have to go through a lot of steps. But the idea of UX is to reduce the complexity of the path the user has to go through, but also to make this moment of interaction an enjoyable one. And I think this is the third part of the answer here, is that it's not about enabling users to do tasks, is how we want them to feel about that. So there's a lot of the UX job and UX design job is to understand also the emotional space of humans, and how we want them to feel about how they interact with us.
Understand. Hey, already in these first minutes, you're talking about a really holistic, encompassing kind of scope when we talk here about user experience. Have you mentioned from physical products to digital products, how people feel, how they work, how they interact, not here's a function, here's how the function works, or how people should do it, but how they go through and how they feel through that process. If we take a step forward and say we find success here, so you and your team, you work hard, you enhance this experience. What does that mean? What's the measure for and some of the indicators of an enhanced experience in this scope?
Right. So having a successful user experience is, of course, to understand that users are enjoying it, are satisfied with it, but more than satisfied is really about them having a delightful experience. Now, how we measure, the success of UX really depends on the challenge that the user has. So in certain experiences, it's about being faster, right? So then we would measure more of the time they need to achieve a task. But in other experiences, it's the problem space is way more about them feeling insecure. So here we have a whole different way of measuring the success of our solution, because this will be about understanding if with our solution, they feel more confident. And it's not necessarily now in this moment to being faster. That is not the goal here. It's really about being more clear, being more transparent. Maybe it's even having more, steps to do just to help them to understand that they have been doing certain action in the right way and reaffirming, oh, you did, the right things. So here we measure something very different than the speed at this moment. So it always comes down to the problem space we are in or the users are in, how they feel and how we want to change this feeling to a more positive one.
Understand. That gets extremely complex when you start to talk about different users, I guess, because you could have a single action or a single topic, and with two different users have a different problem or a different struggle that they feel, and therefore a different positive feeling that you're trying to deliver with that experience.
But that's absolutely right. Usually, especially in our field, we have a very, broad, landscape of users. Even if we have, one part of a product being used by a specific type of users, there's always like a user that comes with less experience than another user. So they're the real experts, and then there are more casual users, more beginner users as well. And indeed, they have different needs because they come with a different background, with different expertise levels. And in this case, it might be that the experienced user would look for something that works maybe faster, while the beginner user needs a reassurance and need more guidance. So this is really important for us to understand the user base and to understand where they're at and what they need. And what are the focus points? Is it really to provide a solution for a landscape of experienced users in priority, or do we really want to approach maybe a new user base that is less experienced? Because we would shape the experience in way different ways in this case. There are also ways, to provide the basic functionalities in a approachable ways for rather, less experienced users, and to have a different layer for more experienced users. So that's a whole complexity that we have indeed in our field and in the landscape of users we work for.
Understand. How do you go about that? How do you go about understanding or learning those different feelings, those different expectations or goals or challenges, and then bringing that into your work and into the process?
So in order to really understand users, there's no magic wand here. It's really about working with them. It's really about having a continuous conversation with them. So what we practice is user research, and it's all about running studies to understand how people are interacting with our products, but generally how they are actually working and how they are feeling. So there are a lot of different practices around that. It can be, an interview. It can be a field study when we go on site and we actually observe how they are working. It can also be user testing. So we try different concepts and see how they react to that, how they feel about it, where they have their insecurities, where they have certain questioning coming up, certain questions. So we observe a lot also how people react to what we are doing. And also it's something that we do really across the whole life cycle. It's not something that we do once, something that should be continuous. And also when we release, a certain solution, the story doesn't end there. We still look at, how do they receive it right now? Is that actually working as intended? Do they feel as we wanted them to feel in this moment? Did we actually achieve our goals here? And we observe and reflect on that, and we also always intend to be able to iterate on what we've been doing. So observe, iterate, and then evolve the solution. So it's a endless loop of understanding and readjusting.
I understand it, and I guess that things would change also over time. Not only you learn more along the process, but those processes, those users, those requirements would change from 1 year, 1 day, 1 week to the next. That would continue
Absolutely.
to drive that iteration.
Absolutely, yeah. The field is evolving. The people are evolving. The world is evolving. 10 years ago, we didn't have the same challenges than today. Also, the technology were completely different, right? So we would not necessarily have the same type of interaction or the same type of expectation toward technology than we have today. So that's ever evolving, and everything that is technology is evolving very, very fast. So we have to keep up with the feelings of the people, the usage, the expectations, the values they have. Do we meet those values? So that is really something that is a never-ending story. So we have to be always in this communication with them to really understand and be a great partner for them as well.
Understand. Now, you mentioned just in that last sentence a few really human characteristics, the feelings, the emotions, the goals, the challenges. So throughout this conversation, we've talked a lot about not the people as users, but the people as people, the humans as humans. So when you talk about this human-centric approach, when you talk about putting that user as a human in the center of the conversation, what does that result in? Like, if you could give us some examples of what a human-centric UX would look like, or the difference that could come when you take this approach compared to focusing just on UI, as you mentioned before.
I guess the best way to try to explain that would be eventually with an analogy. So if you take an experience like if you go to a restaurant, right? You can go to a restaurant like next to your house and you go there, you have a nice dish, you go home, you forget about that. Or you can go to a restaurant that have been way more thinking about the experience they want to provide to their customers. So they would think about the moment people enter their restaurant. So are they welcome, right? They would take care about, how they present the menu. Is this menu like overwhelming? Is it easy to understand? It's easy to make a choice. They would take care about the timing as well. The timing, how long do you need to wait to get, your plate? They will think about the environment, the lighting, the temperature, the whole atmosphere that is in this restaurant. Of course, the dish itself, how it's presented, is important. That is maybe the UI part of it, but also how it tastes, right? And all of those different parameters are contributing to the experience of a person. So if, as an organization, you do not take care of all those little interactions, all those little perceptions, right? Then you obviously take a risk that the experience is not necessarily something that they have enjoyed, or certainly not something that they remember and they're willing to go back to, right? Mm-hmm. So this is really what it means. Like all of those little parameters are impacting the emotional space of a person and how they perceive things. So that is how I would, describe how a user-centric organization works. It's really about understanding those parameters and understanding that they want to consciously shape those moments and those, little bits of perceptions.
Understand. If we took that analogy and we started to apply it a little bit to the industry where we're both working today, when we talk about the management, the operation of buildings, the energy efficiency, the many things that have to happen across a complex system, what would some examples of those be to kind of deliver that experience, deliver that feeling, that joy for all of these different users in our space?
Well, I believe it's all about, it's not about just the UX team making the effort to trying to find, what should be this experience, how it should be shaped. It's really the whole organization and each actor of a project that has to come together and put the effort to meet, those expectations. So it can be, when we talk, for example, about performance, the timing in this case, the timing is something that the development team or the engineering team has to engage in and has to improve. So that is something that contributes to a very good experience or a better experience, but it's not necessarily something that is on the screen itself, So technology and the people who are driving the development part has to look in the direction of the needs of the users and understand them as well to really be able to shape a nice experience. So it's really every actor of a project that has the same goals to provide a good experience, whether it's coming from technology or it's coming, from a design perspective or the service or, the communication, like all of those components should be targeting, the user's emotional space and needs and then comfort.
And if all of that comes together, so the technology, those developers, the design, all of these different things, how important is it from your perspective that you then achieve that experience, that inclusive experience, that intuitive experience? How important is it to really deliver on this complete UX scope for the industry that we work in, but also for those out there, the humans, the users that are in this industry?
Well, I strongly believe that user experience is a core, business value that we provide. It's nothing else than that. It's a core value that people and humans just expect. Especially, we are in a very complicated technical field, but humans in their life, they are comparing, when we take like digital products, for instance, they're comparing our software, our applications with the applications they use on a daily basis, which in fact are less complex, applications. Whether it's like booking a flight or whether it's like booking a restaurant or stuff like that. So, but they're very simple to experiences out there. That's what they're used to. That's what they expect. The simplicity and the intuitiveness of all of what we are experiencing every day this expectation, they have exactly the same expectation when they interact with our product. And they don't really care that is, for us, very complicated to achieve. This is a general expectation. So it's for us, obviously, a very big challenge to reduce the complexity and to form something that is very intuitive. But this is the expectation. This is how the world is working today and how people want to experience their interactions generally.
From our industry perspective, we talk a lot about the challenges we have. The need to find ways to be more sustainable, to save energy, to deliver, environments, indoor air quality, these different things when we're talking about buildings in particular, but also other infrastructures. We have these big challenges that drive us. And as an industry, we recognize that driving digitalization, it's a big crazy word, but let's say leveraging the tools and the technology that we have to help us achieve that is going to be core. And you just mentioned that user experience, this is what people expect. How is this make or break for us to really achieve these goals, to drive the implementation of the technology and the digital tools that we now have at our disposal? Is UX and achieving a positive UX for the humans out there, is that make or break? Is that a must-have for us to really get to where we need to be, from your perspective?
Well, from my perspective, of course, that is essential. That is essential, especially, there is a competition as well. We've been seeing that there's a lot of movement, and I think we understood very well that the experience is a foundational part of a digital transformation. Mm-hmm. So we have to be able today to translate our rather complex, processes and, facilitate those in a way so that we can leverage, the digital space. There is today, especially when we think about sustainability, there is so much opportunities that we have leveraging, digitalization, leveraging, data, leveraging how we can shape an experience around that. This is one of the core possibilities and opportunities that we have that we didn't have before. Like, we have a whole new space of tools, possibilities, technologies to enable our customers to reach, sustainability goals, for instance. And when we are in a digital transformation journey, it is exactly the right moment to leverage also UX to really understand how can we make that in an efficient way? How can we make that in an enjoyable way? But especially, it's not about copying what we've been doing since decades. It's about reinventing how this is going to work in the future and how that's going to help to meet, sustainability goals.
I love that last statement, because I think especially when people talk about, they make that misconception mistake. They think about UI when they mean UX, or the other way around. And they say, hey, we've got great examples out there of people in the software world, in the IT world, that have been doing this. Can't we just copy and paste? And I love that statement where you mentioned it's not about just doing what we've done before, but really reinventing how we do things to make it possible. Eva, thanks so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. I've got one question for you, and it's a tough one. One more question for you, sorry. What happens next? So we're in this stage of digital transformation. You and your team work hard to deliver and enhance the user experience, the human experience around digital offerings, and get out there to try and solve these big problems and enable that digital transformation to happen. What's next for the industry? For you, what are some of the big things that need to happen for us to get from where we are today to where we need to be tomorrow?
Oh, that's a tough question.
That's a tough one, right?
I believe it's an industry that, has been not moving much in the past decades. We're really at this moment where everything is changing. Everything is now possible again. We have so much spaces that needs to be investigated, that needs to be, reconsidered. I feel like that one of the biggest challenges that we have in this industry is really how we can leverage our, the data of the buildings to provide insights to our customer and users so they can start to understand better, and we can also help them with our services, right? Understand better on how buildings can be improved, on how we can really reduce the consumption, increase the comfort, increase the security. We are spending so much time as a society, as humans in buildings, like the majority of our times. So there's so much potential that we have to take the time to investigate. And it all comes down in the infrastructures we have in place and how we can connect that to the digital place to derive, information, but make informed decisions. That is really the loop that we need to go through. And there are multiple ways to achieve that. We need to really step back and explore. It's all about, exploring different approaches. Sometimes we fail, but failing is learning. So to really identify what is the most effective way, where can we be a game changer? And the space is so broad that it's a very big playground, right? So for me, it's really about, it all comes down with how we can enable users and customers to leverage their data to make informed decisions. That's the job.
That's the job. And that's what we need to get to, as you mentioned. I think we have as an industry come a long way. But whenever I talk to experts like yourself, experts that work in the data field, in the data science field, and analytics, we often end on this point, which is we've come a long way to the point now that we have a lot of data. Taking that next step to use it effectively and to really understand and make informed decisions, as you described, is a big step to take, even though it's the natural one that we all know we need to take somehow. Eva, thanks so much. I had a great time. I want to talk more, so I hope at some point we have the chance to have a continued discussion about UX and dive into some details. But thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for joining us and sharing your knowledge.
Well, thank you again for having me. It was a pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
I will as well. And thank you to everyone out there who is listening to us. Remember to comment, subscribe, like, share this episode. Check out every 2 weeks when something new comes along. And we continue to have, hopefully in the future, more discussions with Eva around user experience, but also other colleagues around other technical and informative topics around the building and infrastructure industry. Until then, we'll see you very soon.